questions? Are there questions on this particular job description? I do have a question or a comment. In item 6 of the qualifications, there is a comment about understanding educational administrative rules, regulations, school board policies. I'm presuming these people won't come with that kind of knowledge likely. I would think that's something that we will need to train them to do, at least the school administrative rules and policies and regulations. Obviously, the school law, if they're police officers, I presume that's something they would come with a knowledge of. But
Yes. And that is the purpose of putting that in there, obviously specific to the confidentiality, which is obviously a very key one in any position, as well as, like you said, the administrative regulations and how we're going to go. Because these would be people who would be involved in more severe cases of our policies, where the security guards would be only the initial part of that generally, the administrators are handling all of that. And so to make sure that that person, where appropriate, is aware of those, yes, that would be on us to train them.
Is it possible to use our PSBA resources to train? Because that's a very comprehensive program, actually. If we could just put them.
Can you speak up a little bit? This
Have a very
thing
sore
kicked
throat,
up.
but
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would have to reach out to PSBA to see what resources they have specific to SBOs and SROs. That's a good
Okay.
idea. So
Yeah.
I'll have to look out. So,
are there other comments or
I
questions?
just have one, but my voice is worse than Sherry's. We'll try.
That time of year.
And under the qualifications, I don't see any specific reference to child abuse clearances. Means these officers will be working in close proximity to children. I don't know if it's something we should specifically add, or it's implied.
Yeah, I think it's implied.
them
It would be implied, the board wouldn't be in a position to hire someone for the district unless they did have the
So you're
required
saying
clearances.
you
It
just
is.
said it's a requirement.
In addition to that, your police officers usually come with that anyway, they always have,
Just
yeah, but we would
Double check.
vet them as we do any other employee through those 3 clearances and et cetera, before they were brought before you.
sorry, sir.
Any other comments or questions? So this, along with the rest of this proposal, will not be voted on in February, is that correct? Or you're asking us to do that despite the fact that we,
I would make the recommendation that the school police officer not be on the agenda for February.
okay, that's
If
what I
we're comfortable
assumed.
with the other job descriptions, I would suggest that they do go for February, because then when we're ready to move forward, we can do that. But the school police officer, I think from a level of conversation, we have to leave that. And that would be my recommendation. That would be just bring it back around.
That makes sense.
That way.
Yeah, I think we do need to allow time for public.
Right.
All right, so the other job description that was available tonight, proposed, is among this category as the curriculum supervisors. So, and there are 4 of those. And I believe they parallel one another.
Very close.
I do have a
Yeah,
comment. I think in terms of the, and this is a personal bias, I'll admit that up front. In terms of the science supervisor, it seems to me that simply asking them to hold a certificate in elementary education, which is a generalist certificate, is actually not sufficient. I think, and it may be true of the other disciplines as well, but I think in science, it's, especially since there are very specific disciplines in science at the high school, chemistry, biology, physics, earth science, a number of things, and it's not a subject that our teachers are famous for having as part of their preparation when they go to a college and get an elementary certified. They may take a course in science, maybe even a course in science education, but I don't think that's sufficient, frankly. So to me, it needs to be somebody who has a science background.
So could I
Is it
just,
worded
part
well?
of the job description, which possibly I'll just add a few words in there. Number one, the first qualification is hold a Pennsylvania Supervisor or Administrative Certification. That would actually be a single area content supervisor in science or an administrative principal PK-12. So that they would have to have either the supervisory in science, and it's called a single area content supervisory cert. If they did not have that, then in number two, the understanding would be that they hold a science certification, correct? Is that's what we're looking
Yes.
for? If they hold the administrative PK-12 principal, item number one, then underneath that, they would need a science certification, number two.
So these are
Otherwise-
really tiered, they're not specifically separate criteria. What you're saying
Correct.
is, item two in the qualifications really relates to what occurs in item one, as opposed to standalone.
Yes,
Well,
it
but
could.
specific to your concern, someone could have if you look at number one, could have a principal certification and then an elementary certification, and they would meet the requirements of 1 and 2, which I think is what you're
That
talking
is
about,
my
because the
concern,
principal
yes.
certification does not come with science chops
Right.
or whatever in terms
Ah.
of the
Right.
lists and things like that. And we've had some conversation about that. The reason the job descriptions are written the way they are is to not preclude people who are elementary specialists in an area that have an interest in science, or math, or social studies, because you know I'm the math guy, and so there's that same delineation in math as there would be in terms of elementary math preparation is not the same. And we are not, it is unlikely that in all 4 discipline areas, we're gonna find somebody who has K through 12 capabilities, right? Because
I mean,
when you're.
experience.
Well, just even in terms of the programs, there are not a lot of programs out there where you have the kind of elementary preparation that it takes from a pedagogical standpoint, as well as then the secondary content knowledge, right? Because when I went through and had my math degree, I had an awful lot of math, and I had some methods courses. I didn't have anywhere near the types of methods courses that elementary trained certified teachers have because of the nature of what they're doing in terms of in the classroom. And so when you do a K through 12 supervisor, we are likely to find someone who is stronger in one area or the other, and we will have to help them in terms of working through the other area of. But I wouldn't want to presume that in all 4 areas or in 3 of the 4 areas where we need to preclude it to just secondary trained people, because I'm not sure that's the best thing when you're talking about a K through 12 articulation. They were written the way they are to be able to find the strongest candidates for the job that we're asking them to do. Obviously, part of the question will have to be, if you're not a chemistry trained person, how do you help a chemistry teacher? That is not very different than me as a math trained person learning how to help somebody in AP German. And I still think I can help an AP German teacher be a stronger teacher. It just might not be in terms of German. And so from a curriculum work standpoint and a pedagogical standpoint, I think we can find people who can help improve that way and then provide supports that have to do specifically with curriculum as we work through, which is why they were designed the way they were in terms of that piece. Dr. Scheid, is that okay?
Yes, that was our line of thinking.
Any other comments or questions about these job descriptions? There are actually 4 of them.
What is that singular area, what? I didn't catch that.
It's a single area supervisor.
Okay. So that's the entire list for this part of it. This item 3 on the agenda relates to the Communications and Public Information Coordinator, and there's a job description obviously currently for that. It applies to Mr. Ferry as well as the proposed changes that are what we're discussing tonight. Changes are in red if you have a color coordinated copy.
They should be this color, all of those that were attached to the agendas.
Okay. I have a question about item 27, which is the co-facilitator of the comprehensive plan goal. We've obviously just established a new comprehensive plan. Is this current in the sense that Mr. Perry's job position has that component to it actually now, or is this something that's a carryover?
I almost cut it, because in some ways it relates to that whole, 10% other related duties, kind of
Yeah,
basically
yeah,
whatever
yes.
you're asked to do,
Whatever
you're in
else
charge of
the
doing.
superintendent or school board
Because
decides.
I'm assuming
Yes.
this was put here in terms of communication as part of the comprehensive plan, which is why I chose to leave it in.
Okay.
To be able to, if we were to evaluate a year in or 2 years in, we wanted to evaluate the goals as they pertain to communications, I would expect this person to work hand in hand with other cabinet members and building administrators to help do that. And so I didn't want to remove it from that, but that is why that's there. There is no direct responsibility
Correct.
specific to this comprehensive plan, but because the comprehensive plan does have communication as an important part of it, I wanted to leave that in. Because that was one I thought about. There were a couple that I thought, strike them.
The other question I have is on the qualification number 4, where one of the things stricken was the effective writing communication skills, which seem to me to be extremely crucial in virtually any job these days, at least this kind of job. I know that a lot of it is done electronically in other ways, but is that something we really don't want to have?
We moved it to number 3, just from a standpoint of we thought it flowed better. I completely agree with
Okay.
you. Yeah, that this person is in part a professional writer and needs to be. So, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
I have a question. For the component under, maintains and contributes to district's Facebook
Board member.
21. And then it also writes, edits, oversees production of the report to. So all of this is tied to basically the school district website and ancillary media. So I'm wondering if, where it's in here, that I didn't see it, does the person have to maintain links and make sure that links are active, and then work as a liaison with other entities to make sure if there is a problem with their, and I don't know technology, sorry. So I'm
The
speaking in
expectation, and it may not be as clear then, the expectation was in number 17. You can see in number 17, we struck A, because in A started to be that list of, okay, here are a couple things to remember, but it's
Okay.
not the whole list of being a webmaster.
Okay.
The fact that this person is the webmaster for the district website implies to me and to us that this person has the primary responsibility for the website and everything connected to it.
And everything connected.
And so, right, and so whether we need to clarify it there or
Yes.
just make sure that we clarify it with the employee, but the website obviously, it will
Yes.
manufacture.
Well, I mean, I
manufacture
just
would
said,
be-
and
Yep,
the way
vital.
trends are going, this is on point, I think, with technology trends.
Definitely. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions about this job description? People are okay to put this on the agenda for
Yeah, I think
February 25th. It will be there on the personnel committee. All right, that is the extent of the agenda items. I will announce that the next personnel committee is scheduled for Monday, March 4th, 2019. And obviously, we will be discussing this issue of the safety officer, security officer, whatever we call them, that night as well. At this point, we're back to public comment. Who would like to make public, if anyone? Mrs. Furlong first.
Oh, go ahead.
Let him go first.
All right, Mr. Radley.
Oh, I can stay here, or? Okay.
Please come there, that's,
It's so nice being informed. Thank you for listening to me. I just wanted to, maybe I'm just not familiar, what's the interview process going to be like for these police officers? And I know the teachers, you do a great job of that, but how you do the police officers?
Why don't you go through all of the things, are there gonna be multiple questions that you
No,
have?
okay. I have a couple things. Well, how do you address partying in the schools? But more importantly, I want to get the personality, I mean, is there people gonna, you know, interact with this person, get a feel for the person, see how he interacts with different types of people?
And that is part of all of our interview processes in terms of how to get to best know the candidate.
Okay.
It obviously looks differently if it's an internal person versus an external person. I would
Right.
expect that we'll have both applicants would be my guess, at least in terms of we have people internally who qualify for the positions if they were to apply. We know their interaction skills and can talk to some people who've seen them. The interview process would have to look differently for outside people, being able to get some of those soft skills that you're talking about. Beyond, obviously, then just some specific questions about job responsibilities and how to handle scenarios.
Now, would the
those
public,
pieces.
would the public get a chance to see the person before they're hired, or you hire them and then you're introduced, this is our guy?
Routinely
Or-
for positions, the recommendations come before the board, and so that is the first time where that name, we would even have to talk about legally as to whether whether we would actually disclose the name of this person or persons from a safety standpoint. There might be some decision in terms of it might be best for the candidates to not be well-known.
Okay.
We have to talk through those types of things.
Okay.
That's some of the conversations that some of the school districts have had around some of their, either school resource, not school resource, but school police officers as to how obvious should it be in terms of, is it, you know, because you have multiple people who are in security, how obvious should it be the one who has the firearm? And right, is it necessary that they be, because it's not legally necessary
Right.
that they be obvious, and whether that, you know, doubt as to who could it be, and does that increase the safety in the building?
Well, I look at it from a different perspective, is building that relationship and putting a face with the person that I'm supposed to trust. That's why I'm.
And that's important for all of our security guards.
Yeah.
Right, that training, definitely, so,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Could you announce who you are and what township?
Oh,
you
sure.
live in, please?
Alex Rajan from Bedminster Township.
Thank you.
Sorry.
My viewers want to know.
Seems like the sergeant. Hi, Kevin Foster, Hilltown Township. So I was texting with my wife. So this is from my wife. So she had a quick question in regards to the not SRO, school police officer, SPO. That's the correct acronym. So would they be expected to do rounds at the middle schools? So that's one question I had. Or would they be stationed at the middle schools? How much time would they spend there? The large student population, obviously, in the middle schools. One additional question too, is there any implications to insurance? So does the school need to apply for or purchase more insurance now that we do have police officers on campus? And then the second, or the third, this is more of a comment, not a question. I think what you guys talked about here, ensuring that the community participates in this dialogue, is going to be very, very important, considering what's occurred in this district, what's occurred nationally. I think it's a really important part of civic engagement to ensure that you guys put it forth to the community, make sure you publicize it, ensure that people are participating and answering questions and they feel like their concerns are being addressed. I think that's really important. So thank you for doing that.
I can answer your first two questions, one easily and one a little more vaguely. There is something called law enforcement professional liability coverage, which you are required to do if you have either a school police officer or school resource officer, and it is budgeted in. We know what the current amount is. So yes, there is additional insurance when you are instituting one or the other. From a middle school standpoint, these people will be housed at the high school, and so primarily their responsibility will be at the high school from that standpoint. We will want them to have relationships with all 11 schools, both from an administrative standpoint as being well known. And so what that schedule would look like the first year is probably far more than what it would be moving forward. But they will be routinely in the other buildings, but they will be housed at the high school. Okay, in terms of what that looks like. We don't have, I can't tell you percentages. I don't know what that will be in terms of days per week and things like that. That's one of the reasons we're bringing in the other part-time person to be able to cover some of those. So that while the person's out of the building, we can still cover their responsibilities in the building that aren't school police officer responsibilities.
I'll text my wife that response.
Excellent.
Other public comments? Mrs. Furlong?
Yes.
Do you want me to do course?
I see if I can fit in the words.
I was in high school AV club, all right?
Sue Furlong, West Rock Hill Township. Okay, I think you want me to tell you all my questions. Number one, you were talking about how the students' interests will drive personnel by what they're interested in taking. I would like to remind you, as a taxpayer, we sort of have the rule that you need at least 20 participants in a class. Classroom sizes less than 20, generally speaking, are not deemed to be of enough interest. So I would like to make sure that that continues to be the case. Number 2, instructional coaches. It seems like we're adding more overhead cost, and I'd like to know how you will measure the success of that decision, because they're not in the classroom with this student all the time. This is sort of an overhead thing. I want to know how you're going to measure success, and if it's not successful, that you'll make a commitment to bring it to an end. How will the teachers work when relieved of playground duty be tracked to ensure that it isn't just extra time off, as you mentioned? And how will that be measured for success or failure? How do you get a yield and output worth $67,000? Okay, so that was the cost of bringing in the help for the playground and the cafeteria. So you need to match that cost with a benefit that is at least of an equal amount, in my opinion. How does the combine the gifted and the STEM to full-time save $50,000? And you said that it was a cost savings. I'd like to just verify that that is a cost savings from the current budget, not from our current actual experience and spending. Number 5, content time versus enrichment time. What does that mean? As a layperson, I can't tell you, so I would like to have an understanding what that means. Number 6, proposing to add people and positions not in the budget. And then what you did, you didn't hire certain people that were in the budget, and you swapped that out for other people. And I'm just curious whether or not that should have been a board-approved change rather than just an administrative change. It seems like we keep adding positions, and yet we have a declining enrollment, especially in the grade schools, elementary schools. So as a taxpayer, I'd like to think that we're paying as much attention to consolidating where we can, and not just continually adding staff, and somehow justifying keeping staff when we've got a significant decline in our enrollment. I didn't see the job description of these 7 instructional coaches. We went over the other ones, but I didn't see the job description for those 7 individuals. And I think before hiring anybody, we should know what the content of their day is going to be. And again, I'd also like to know how you're going to measure their success or failure. Number 9, you're going to do, it seems like, a fair amount of training for the SRO, and I'm just curious if there's any way to guarantee that after they have all this training and some other district decides they would love to have an SRO, how do we prevent that employee from taking our paid-for training and moving to another district? Will there be a contract? Will there be an amortization of the training costs over 3 or 5 years that would make it so that if they did leave, then they would be responsible for the training costs, and we could recoup that? I believe that was it. Oh, and the communications person, Al? I didn't see anything in here about the TV channel. We were sort of promised that if we spent $250 grand as taxpayers, and you went out to all the different municipalities, that at some future point in time, the community would be served by that equipment, by the school district, so that the municipalities would be able to alert their citizens to certain things that were going on in their municipalities with the TV channel that was secured for Pennridge. So, I don't see that here. And the money has been spent, now we're adding personnel, more highly, well, I won't say more highly qualified, but I'll just say, I don't know, well qualified. And I don't see anything for the townships and municipalities, and I don't see any return on the $250,000 as a community.
Well, let me do my best, and then you can email me the ones I didn't cover, because I try to take good notes. We obviously are aware of the class size guidelines that are in policy.
Okay.
The instructional coaches you referred to a couple times. I will choose to disagree with you that they are overhead in terms of that piece.
They're not teachers.
Their job descriptions, we mentioned, are still being developed, and we obviously will bring them before the board before they are, because they are new for us, and so we are in the process of developing them based off of other school districts, and we can talk about that as part of the presentation. The SPO training and whether we prevent them from leaving, we don't currently do that in terms of our responsibilities outside of graduate programs. We don't do that for teacher training. We don't, so we'd have to talk about whether that's something we wanted to work into an SPO contract or not. Then we don't currently have that model. The communications person, item number, I don't know if it's actually 32, it's because the numbering's wrong in terms of the numbers, but it does talk about the cable station, and this person would be primarily responsible for working and serving as a liaison with the cable channel from that standpoint. Gifted STEM, as I talked about, the reason that's marked as savings is that's comparing to current year budget. And so I mentioned this a couple times in terms of there were 4 positions put in the budget for this year, 2 STEM, 2 Spanish. One of them was allocated to special ed, and that was approved by the school board in the fall. I forget if it was September, October that we added that position. And so it was clear that it was now, the money was available because we weren't filling those 4 positions, so it wasn't just unadministrated. The 3 positions that are left, we're only allocating 2.6 of them for the recommended STEM gifted support, because to get from 4.4 to 7, I need 2.6 teachers to do that. The savings is the 0.4 of a teacher that we wouldn't have to fill that's currently in the budget, as well as the benefits package, because the 0.4 person has benefits because they are full-time within the district. And so that's why that savings is put in there, because it's compared to the money that's budgeted this year. If we were to have it this year, based off of this year's recommendation, it would be $50,000 cheaper to run this model than what was recommended and approved in the budget for September from that standpoint. When I talked about content versus enrichment, that was in reference to the gifted teachers, and that there is a gifted curriculum. And so there is a gifted pullout where there are specific content pieces and a curriculum they deliver. There then is enrichment that is provided within the classroom that is for the gifted students, but also other students that would benefit from that. And that's what I was delineating in terms of us being able to provide enrichment within the classroom. And my strength of that, all right, and I'll have you email me if I forgot other things. Thank you.
Okay, and my last parting remark would be to reemphasize the declining enrollment. At some point in time, I think the taxpayer needs to understand that there is some effort to be more efficient, use the building more efficiently, and create a savings for the taxpayer when the enrollment is declining by several hundred students over the years. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? Mr. Rush.
Good evening, Raj Perkins. I think it's fair to say that when a new superintendent is hired, that there needs to be some real benefit of the doubt for a person's view on what the structure of the academic world should look like. So I really like what I heard tonight, much of it, in terms of instruction and restructuring some positions. My concern, those of you who know me, is going to be about the police officer. I think we founded our district in 1952, so in almost 70 years, there's never been a need for a police officer, not that I know of. Maybe there was discussions before. What's happening in our country, certainly there's discussions happening in thousands of places. Will a police officer, whether there be a resource officer from a jurisdiction or an officer employed by us as a community district, will it make us safer? So it's usually based on the idea of perception of safety. We're always in the field of perception. Will this help? So before I even attempt to answer a question I don't even think is really answerable, I guess my question is what's the need? Like, what data has brought us to this point? Is it needed? What data has driven the idea that this is needed? And being a youth advocate, I always try to listen to young people. And the only thing I ever usually have, because I don't have the ability to talk to thousands of students in Pennridge, is our survey. So we asked 2,000 students here last year, how safe do they feel? Do they feel safe in Pennridge? 87% of them said yes. Now, I traveled to a lot of places in America where that would be like 13% say yes, they feel safe. So when I have 13% of kids telling me to school they don't feel safe, then I'm going to really look at some really severe decisions about what to do. Have you ever been threatened by anybody in school with a weapon? Less than 2% ever said that happened. And for the weapons, probably not a gun, it might be a knife or whatever, who knows. Have you ever stayed home from school because you're afraid of being bullied? Less than 4% in Pennridge. Those are pretty remarkable numbers. This is a relatively safe place to raise families. It's why I stayed here when my daughter was born. When my daughter went to school at Franklin and Marshall, the officers wore no guns. And after the school shooting a few years ago, they debated, should we weaponize our officers? They spent 1 full year in discernment. So I really appreciate tapping the brakes and saying, let's have a discussion. Let's not like rush to this. Because once we have one officer with the gun, there'll be people that want 2. Eventually they'll want 11 officers, 1 at every building. It's just common sense. People are going to say, well, why my kid? Why do we need an officer with a weapon in my kid's school? There's no research that says that a weaponized human will make a place safer. In fact, the research actually brings us to the opposite data, that schools that have police officers, whether they're employed by the school or jurisdiction, the citations will increase. There'll be more arrests. And that's my concern, that I don't want to see adolescent behavior criminalized. God only knows I would have been arrested. So, with that, I really appreciate us really slowing down.
For the police.
Did I put that on tape? Sorry, Mom. Let's really slow down and really use our collective intelligence. Do we want to weaponize Pennridge? And I know that's a phrase that maybe others won't agree with, but that's what it's about. Focus groups with kids. My goodness, we surveyed where we should graduate. You know, I'd like to know what the staff wants. I'd love to know what the kids want. I'd love to know what parents want. Let's just slow down and let's find out what people really want and then make it a really informed decision. Thank you very much.
Anyone else for public comment?
Peter, Matt?
Yep.
So, Lee, thank you.
Yes, sir.
As you recall, last year, we did have a number of information sessions with
Yes.
the community.
Yes,
And the community was pretty passionate
I know.
about this topic. So the board takes it very seriously.
I know.
And we don't enter into this lightly.
I don't think you do, and I always say that. I don't think that any of you make decisions lightly. In fact, it's a lot easier to stand here and share these comments than sit in that chair having to make a vote. You know, and God forbid there ever be an incident, a refrain will be, we should have had this done. That would have helped.
Yeah.
When in fact, you know, when you do a survey of all the local police departments and find out from their chiefs, what will be their response to the building, God forbid if there's an incident. With Bedminster, Hilltown, Percy, Sellersville, Pennridge Regional, they're well covered. I know they don't have a lot of officers, but they'll be there within minutes compared to one officer here versus driving over to, you know, grass or something. So I agree, there was some meetings held, that's great, I just think there should be more, that's all. And I really think if it's going to come down to a school officer or SRO, that's better, because you have the ultimate veto. As superintendent or board, no, we're not going to have this child arrested. You know, it's not the chief of police, I mean, in a way, you become a chief of police. Northampton hired their own police department. They have like multiple officers in there. Philadelphia police carry no weapons. in school. All the school officers have no weapons. But thank you, I did know that, thank you.
Any other public comment? If not, this meeting's adjourned, and the next meeting will be promptly following it. Thank you.